Boyfriend, Teenage Love. Written by Vella Jamar. Narrated by Deja, Nance. Chapter 15. On the first day of school, Diana and I wore heels as planned. We tried our best not to fall and look sophisticated at the same time. We attempted to look as though we had walked in them for years. A few people laughed, but for the most part, we made it through the day as we did a balancing act walking the sloped outside hallways. We retrieved our schedules and welcomed Olita, who is now attending Harriel's High. She was absolutely thrilled. I don't know if it was because she was in high school or because she was now there with Raymond, whom she finally hooked, just as she said she would. She could keep an eye on him and not have to ask anyone what he was doing at school as she had in the past, armed with 1,000 questions. Their relationship was now on a serious path versus past puppy love, and she was a happy camper being walked to class by her Raymond. Not long after Marcus settled in with his grandmother, he was allowed to drive more often. Diana and I decided to take the driver's education and driver's training. The day before we started the classes, which required us to be there early morning, Marcus came over in the car. As he drove toward his grandmother's house, I asked him to show me how to drive. He thought about it for a second, didn't see where it would be harmful, and said, "Come, baby, and sit on my lap." I drove all the way from the train track to his grandmother's house where we parked and talked. It was so exciting as he told me to take my place back on the passenger side. He didn't want anything in particular as we sat while I looked around his new neighborhood. He wouldn't let me drive back home, but I was thrilled at having driven earlier. He took me home early enough so I could get in. I had to be at school earlier than normal to attend my driving courses. We kissed goodnight. He said he'd be back the next evening and was gone. At 7 o'clock, we attended driver's education, and at lunchtime, we took driver's training. Even though I only had the one experience of being behind the wheel, I felt as if I had an edge over the non-drivers. I took the wheel as if I'd been driving forever. The teacher guarded that extra break as if his life depended on it. Each one was more excited than the previous as we took turns at the wheel while the teacher kept reminding everyone to keep silent, not to make the driver nervous. When we pulled back in front of the school, everyone felt some extra level of maturity as we exited the car. Diana and I in particular. First the high heels and purse, and now we were learning to drive. We were on our way. After I went home, I packed my bags looking forward to an evening with Marcus. He didn't know it yet, but I was going to drive again. He came around 8:30 as planned. Once again, his grandmother was out of town, and he was left in charge of keeping an eye on his grandfather. I was signed up for a Saturday course at the college and brought a change of clothing so I could go to school from there. As soon as I got in the car, I wanted to drive again. Marcus seemed so lost in thought and kept saying no, regardless of how much I pleaded for him to let me drive just one more time, baby, please. I repeated over and over again. I don't know what was wrong. All I knew is that I wanted to drive, and he flat out refused my request. By the time we reached his grandmother's house, I was disappointed in him for not giving me another shot behind the wheel. I took my overnight bag to his room where he suddenly came to life. I used the bathroom and went straight to bed. He checked on Pops, his grandfather, and quickly turned off the light thinking he was going to undress us. We laid down in separate beds. There were twin beds in the room, and it was now my turn to tell him no. He tried with very little effort to sleep in the same bed, or nag me for sex in any way for that matter. Something had to be pressing on his mind. We practically had the entire house to ourselves. I didn't get it. We went to sleep. I was tired and not wanting to be disrespectful in his grandmother's house anyway, at least any more disrespectful than I already had been at the point for spending the night in her absence. She seemed like a sweet lady. She was the best grandmother on the face of this earth according to Marcus, who hadn't yet met my grandmother. The next morning, I woke up feeling nervous about the possibility of his mother coming. I kept telling him to get up so he could take me to school. I did not want to get caught over there. We had never run into her at that point, and I desired to keep it that way. He kept telling me he'd get up in 5 more minutes, right up until I heard her car driving up the driveway. Marcus, I hear a car. Let me climb out of the window," I said in panic as I shook him woke. He said no, and finally got up and quickly threw a blanket over my bag and told me to hide in the closet. She's probably just coming to fix Pop's breakfast. He slid the closet door closed and jumped back in the bed acting as though he were asleep. I was very nervous and don't know why I let him talk me out of flying out the window like First Mind told me to. First thing she did upon entering was come in the room and check on Marcus. She noticed covers on both beds messed up and asked him why. He mumbled, "First I slept in that one, and then I changed over to this one." He said in a yawning tone, trying to sound convincing that he was still asleep. I was praying with a bowed down head. She seemed to have bought his story and went to check on Pops before going to the kitchen to fix his breakfast. Marcus couldn't even burn a pot of water when it came to cooking, I later learned. She must have thought about it for a minute and marched right back to the room, straight to the closet and slid it open. I don't know what in the world I was thinking as she patted me on the head and said, "Hey, get up and get out of here." I sat frozen, too afraid to move with my head still bowed down, resting on my knees. She went on to say, "Don't you know if you don't have any respect for yourself, these knuckleheaded boys won't have any for you either." Then she repeated, "Get up and get out of here," which I could no longer ignore. I sprang up, grabbed my bag, and zipped out the front door as fast as my 2 feet could carry me. I'd never been so embarrassed in my life. Marcus just lay there the entire time she talked, not once opening his eyes. I ran and sat on somebody's porch for a minute, then ran to the corner store and asked the owner if I could use the bathroom. I quickly took off those skimpy shorts and changed into my decent school outfit. I milled around inside the store as I waited for the bus to arrive. I could see his grandmother's house from the store. I phoned Diana and told her what happened. After listening to the details, she informed me that she wasn't going to school, as she was hanging up the phone. I heard her laughing before putting down the receiver, getting ready to tell her oldest sister of my embarrassment. Out of the 2.5 years we had been seeing each other, out of all the millions of times we had been sneaking, out of all the conniving we had done while we lived around the corner from each other, that was our first encounter with her. A few years after Marcus had moved out there, his brother Raymond moved in. I don't know why, just that he did. On quite a few occasions, Marcus and I would be on the phone talking, and as soon as he either saw or heard her car, he'd suddenly wrap up the conversation with, "Tandy, I'll talk to you later," and slam down the phone without giving me a chance to say bye. Bewildered, I'd call back, and Raymond would always answer. I'd ask him where was Marcus, and he'd reply, "I don't know, but he is gone. I'm talking out the backyard and over the fence gone." I didn't know the depths of their relationship, but would come to understand as the years went by. Then it all made sense. When Marcus came a few days later, I asked him what happened, and he simply did not want to get into whatever she said, and so I stopped pestering him. I was glad to see him in one piece as he stood there looking so lovely. We rode to the burger joint and enjoyed a meal together before he dropped me off at home so I could make school the next day. Marcus was ecstatic living at his grandmother's house. He gathered some birds and reinvented his bird cage in his shed in the backyard. He was a happy soul. One time he brought me over, and for all the time we spent interacting, I felt he should have left me at home. He had at least 3 friends come, and all they did was talk pigeons the entire afternoon. After they left, an older next-door neighbor man began chatting. When Marcus mentioned to him that he had killed a possum for trying to get to his birds, he asked, "What did you do with it, son?" Marcus told him that he had disposed of it. The old man said, "Boy, you threw away some good eating." He told Marcus to be sure and give it to him if he came across another one. They next discussed the garden in his grandmother's backyard. He was right at home and seemed very peaceful living there. He had never invited me to his home around the corner, at least not when anyone was there. He took me back inside and threw together a bite to eat. When we finished munching, we got in the car and he drove me back home. It felt good to be driven around instead of walking, running, or hopping fences like we were accustomed to. October 3rd was my birthday. My friends wanted me to smoke a joint for the first time. I don't know why I told them that I'd try it, but I did. I spent most of the previous day with Marcus's cheap ass, who knew my birth date at that point and didn't put any money aside for something special. He figured just because he was driving that a ride in his car was sufficient. I guess that's how he felt because that's all I received from him. They were all anxiously waiting for the day I promised to convert from a square. We caught the bus home and went straight to Judy's house. Their mom was at work and they were ready for the big showdown. Judy, Trina, Diana, and Alvin were ready for square-ass me to hit a joint. We were in the living room and it was rolled up twice as big as what I'd seen them smoke. I didn't know what they were trying to do to me after seeing that monster joint. I also didn't know what the big deal was. We were sitting down and they hit and passed it to me and said, "Come on and hit it like you said you would." Diana leading the way. I sat there and I, I changed my mind. I did not want to after all. I knew you weren't going to do it. They all shouted. I don't know why they wanted me to so bad. I felt good with what God naturally gave me. I don't know why they were smoking it in the first place. They kept trying to get me to change my mind, but I refused and went in the other room while they did their thing. All they ever did afterwards was eat and laugh. I could do that without the aid of a joint. I spent time with Snoopy and then went home away from them weed smokers. I completed some homework assignments and went to bed. The next day, Diana and I caught the bus to school. We were so happy as we were getting ready to complete our final year. We finally made it to the top. I still ditched here and there, but nothing on God's green earth was going to come between my diploma and me. Not Marcus, not her, not anything. I had worked too hard for it in the beginning and was working hard again now that I was getting close to graduating. We needed 225 credits in order to walk across the stage. What I had accumulated up until then, and what I could accrue until the end of school, meant that I had very little messing up room. I was in my third year of taking French and sewing. It was an absolute must to pass American government. All the other classes were easy. I no longer had to take PE, English, or math. Later that evening, Diana and I decided to go to the football game, which was being played at El Cerrito High. We missed the school's yellow bus, so we hopped on AC Transit and headed to the game. When we boarded the bus, we went straight toward the back, which is where everybody who thought they were somebody always sat. We stopped midway when we saw gang members. Some from our neighborhood had already taken the entire section. We sat near the back as we talked to them. They were a loud, friendly bunch of thuggish fellows, most with no future ahead of them. We laughed and joked all the way to our stop in El Cerrito. We rang the bell at a stop before our actual destination. We didn't want to walk with them. One by one, they got off at the back door at our stop. As soon as the last one got off, Diana and I jumped back on, and the entire bus of customers, including the bus driver, roared in laughter as we drove off. We disembarked at another stop. We were not going to be the only two girls in a crowd of thugs. We walked up the hill to El Cerrito High, paid our entrance fee, and strode toward our purple and white-clad football team members and pom-pom girls. It was so exciting to finally be a part of the crowd that we used to always hear about on the intercom, or see in print in the school's newspaper, or at the end of school in the yearbook. I don't know why we had missed all of the games up until that point. As we made our way across the bleachers, I saw Alita with some big fat lady and asked whom she was. "Mrs. Ream," she said defensively, as if I'd offended her. I hadn't recognized her. My mouth dropped and I quickly moved further down the bleachers and whispered in Diana's ear about the encounter. I still reeled in embarrassment for her catching Marcus and I at his grandmother's house weeks earlier. Raymond was on the football team, and she was there to support her boyfriend. The pom-pom girls were cheering our team on, though they were sorely losing. We joined in on the chants, and were having a ball. Everybody there was high on fun. At halftime, we went to buy snacks from the junk bar as we walked around greeting everyone. We were so happy. As the game started up again, there were many high points as those strong fellows tussled over the ball. Their adrenaline was in high gear as they tried to beat the opposing team. I looked over at Olita sitting by Marcus's mother, and she was cheering for Raymond. She loved that boy to death. As the game concluded, our poor guys lost. Both teams did their ritual of handshaking at the end of the game as the other team's cheerleaders roared in their winning chants. It was amazing being out there with our peers in a different atmosphere. Diana and I were having the time of our lives. I didn't know where Marcus was. He normally supported his brother at his games. He used to gloat whenever Raymond actually made a touchdown. I was not into sports, and so his talk of them with me was pretty limited when he saw just how disinterested I was. As we walked sadly back to the bus after having lost, Diana and I were still high from the excitement and began hugging and singing the winning chants. We topped it off by jumping into the air as we finished each one, as the cheerleaders had during the game. No one saw anything funny in our misguided sense of humor, the football players in particular. We didn't care and did it a few more times before boarding the bus. We saw the gang members that we'd rode the bus to the game with as we were going out the gate. They didn't attend our school, which meant they wouldn't be able to ride our school bus, What a relief. Despite having lost everyone, was in a pretty good spirits as we drove back to the school grounds. We, along with some other girls, were waiting near the boys' gym as the boys were taking a shower. Diana and I snuck up to the boys' locker office area and were looking down at some of the stark naked players run around the locker room until the coach discovered and made us go back outside and wait. We walked home accompanied by some of the players walking our direction. Diana and I hung out at her house the rest of the evening when we couldn't come up with a ride to a party. We did not feel like walking. She then walked me midway home and I ran until I was at my front door. I was about to knock when suddenly my baby emerged from the backyard, and we stole away in the Maverick. I turned on the heater and looked for a station on the radio. We rode around town, got something to eat, and landed in front of the park we used to frequent. I was tired, and apparently so was he. I think he was getting along a lot better with his mother now that they lived under separate roofs. He said he had just left from around there and stopped to see what I was up to before making the trip back to North. He drove me home, saw me inside, and was gone. Back at the girls' club, we discussed the upcoming Halloween party we were planning at the meeting. We were so excited about it. I designed the flyer, and we told everyone we ran across who we thought would contribute to the fun at our party. We were on a mission to make sure it was going to be a much bigger success than the one we had given the past summer. The next day after brunch, Diana and I decided to ditch the rest of the day. As we were walking down the street, a guy named Rooney who liked, flirted with, and wanted Diana along with his friend Waylon drove up in a big fine Cadillac. We jumped in and went to their friend's house. There was a couple inside, and the guy seemed to have a strong dislike for Waylon as he looked at him with obvious disgust. Waylon asked me to go in the room with him. He repeatedly asked until I turned around and asked him, not realizing I was talking so loudly. "What are we going to do in there?" With a big smile suddenly fixed on his face, he answered, "Baby, I can show you better than I can tell you." I smiled back and repeated, "Baby, if you can't tell me, you damn sure can't show me." The entire room of people, including Waylon, laughed. I truly did not realize how loud I was talking. A bag of weed was suggested, and they put their monies together and barely reached the required $5. Someone ran and bought the sack. They all took puffs and passed it around. I declined and began telling everyone about the wonderful Halloween party we were going to give. I explained that it was required to wear a mask. Waylon acted like he didn't get it, and so I explained a second time. He still asked, "Do I have to wear a mask?" The fellow who seemed to not like him answered and said, "No, Waylon, you do not have to wear a mask." Everyone laughed hard again at poor Waylon. Around 3:30, Diana and I grabbed our bags and high-heeled it down the street to her grandmother's house. She went and ate down her high, and I made my way home to get some homework completed. I decided that I would dress up as a hooker for our party. I went over Judy's house to check out some of her mother's wigs. I was having fun just seeing how I was going to look at the upcoming affair. I admired myself in her lengthwise mirror, rolling up my shorts at the bottom and tying up my shirt at the end. I put on her wig and danced to the music. No one thought I was going to go through with it and said I was just talking smack. I changed back into my normal self and went home to complete my studies. We continued telling everyone we ran into about our party, passing out flyers. We wanted it to be a huge success. Miss Kathy picked up donations all over town. That lady got things done, and I deeply admired her. Later that weekend, when Marcus came over, I told him about our party. We had never gone out together. Marcus wasn't heavy into the party scene. He didn't respond one way or the other as to whether he'd come. As we wrapped up talking in the car, I snatched his watch and decided I wanted to wear it. He asked for it back. I refused and ran inside the house. He was mad but got in his car and left rather than trying to tussle with me to get it back. He didn't seem to have the energy at the time and decided he'd get it later. He wore it quite often and seemed pretty attached to it. I don't know why I snatched it, just something to be doing, I guess. On the night of the party, we decided to meet over Diana's house. Her and Judy were being civil to each other, and we anticipated having a good time. When it was time to go, I couldn't find Judy. Apparently, she had left for Diana's house without me, which meant I would have to walk 10 or so blocks in my hooker outfit alone. When I finished dressing into my skimpy jean shorts, I rolled them up at the bottom and tied up my shirt at the end. I then went to Judy's house and acquired her mom's wig and walked down Barrett Avenue without any problems. It was still a little light outside. When I got to 6th and Barrett, as I was walking across the street, Someone coming from the direction of North Richmond driving a big Cadillac saw me and smashed down on the brakes, sending a loud screeching sound in the air. I was alone and scared at the sight of the car stopping. I took off running in my high heels and didn't stop until I was at Diana's house, at least 3 blocks away. I was completely out of breath when I arrived. Diana and Judy asked what happened, and as I was explaining, Diana's neighbor, who called himself a pimp, just so happened to be in the middle of the street with his motor running. When he saw me, he literally grabbed and tried to throw me in the backseat of his red Mustang. He said, "You are going to MacArthur to go and make me some money." Diana and Judy, who were both right there, helped rescue me. It was something about Judy and that big mouth of hers, which I was very grateful for that night. "Leave her alone," she yelled as they pushed him back and helped me out of another near-disastrous situation. I knew I was going to get a little attention, but that was a bit much. The night was still young. We stepped inside of Diana's house to check out each other's outfit. Clearly, I had outdone everyone. We walked to McDonald Avenue and stopped by the liquor store before boarding the bus. An older church-looking lady sat eyes on me and gave me the look of utter disgust at the sight of me in my prostitution outfit. I couldn't say much at her disgust. We left and went to catch the bus to the YWCA, where our party was being held. People stared at us, me in particular, with a look of what in the world splattered across their face. When we arrived, Kathy was happy to see us and immediately put us to work. That's something she never ran out of, was having something for you to do. We were happy to comply. After all, we had put a lot of effort into making the party a success. Everybody was happy as we ran around trying to get the party in order. The DJ was still putting together the music and playing it loud as he tested a few songs. We were in and out of the kitchen, dancing to the music in between, and getting the hot dogs and sodas ready to sell. The floor was a big one, and we were going to have ourselves a ball. Everyone made fun of my hooker outfit. I didn't care. I knew I was the most creatively dressed and was looking good. Miss Kathy and her friends, whom she got to help chaperone, were also dressed for the occasion. As darkness fell, the partygoers were at the door. It was time to party. One of the other girls from the club sat at the door with Kathy's adult friends and collected the entrance fee. The floor filled quickly as everyone danced to their heart's delight. It was our very own New Age dance floor. As a matter of fact, it looked like the floor was bigger than all 3 dance floors at the club put together. We took turns in the kitchen so everyone could have a chance at having fun. We were given our own live party. Me, Diana, and Judy were hey-heying each other all across the floor as we danced to the music. The night really livened up when the crowd from our football team stepped in after winning the game that night. They were in high spirits and really got the place rocking. The crowd was growing and everyone was having a good time. Marcus was still mad at me for taking his watch and had the nerves to bring a girl named Samantha to our party. Boy, was I hot. I wanted to kick both of their asses but pretended not to notice them, him in particular. I could not believe it. He was trying to make me jealous. I was dancing but feeling very nervous at the sight of him bringing someone to a party that I had invited him to. After the song was over, I went and volunteered in the kitchen to cool off. When I came back out on the floor, someone grabbed me, and we danced. Everybody, as usual, was grabbing at Diana the most. With my hooker outfit on, they were grabbing me just as much, though. I was not interested as I was too preoccupied with Marcus. A few years later, Raymond told me as he and his friend Calvin went to grab Diana at the same time, he noticed a stench about her. He said he backed up to let Calvin have her in the dance. He said he was on the other side of the floor dancing when Calvin kept hollering, "Raymond, Raymond, Raymond," while dancing in a circular motion, pinching his nose so Diana couldn't see him as they burst into laughter. He got a kick each time he told the story, laughing so hard he could hardly get it out. On one song, Kathy had the entire floor to herself with her dance partner. That lady had a lot of energy, self-esteem, and was a lot of fun to be around. Everyone stood around envying how bold she was dancing on that big floor all by her and her partner's lonesome. Next song, everybody filled the floor and danced to the latest songs. I was dancing and noticed Marcus dancing with a girl. He later told me when I turned around that he was dancing behind me trying to touch my butt in those hot shorts I was wearing. I was so stunned at him bringing someone to our party, I didn't notice. He didn't stay too long. He never was too much of a party animal. At the stroke of midnight, we had to end the party, YWCA regulations, and clean up. We all band together as Kathy ran the guys out who were still hanging around trying to grab Diana's boobs and my butt. When we finished cleaning, there was still some guys outside waiting. When we went to get in the car with an old friend who had failed to graduate a few months earlier, they screamed, "Look at the hooker! Look at the hooker!" Everyone laughed. At least they weren't trying to throw me in their car to take me to MacArthur, which was a notorious spot for prostitution in Oakland, California. We were blissful and did not want the night to end. It was a very big turnout, and we were very pleased with the financial results of our fundraiser. As we drove around looking for another party, we somehow ended up going to Samantha's house. I don't know how in the world we decided to go, but when we drove up, Marcus's car was parked in front of her house. They said, "Let's go in." I refused and stayed in the car. No good, dirty dog, I thought to myself as I waited for them to come out. That boy had some nerve. My heart sank as I sat there feeling betrayed. He was still dominating my emotions, and I hated every moment of it. I was so glad when they came back and we left. Ronald, who was driving, used to like Diana, as did quite a few guys we ran into. She would talk, flirt, and get a ride out of whomever, but that was the extent of her involvement. She still had not found anyone she was interested in being serious with yet. It took Marcus about 2 weeks after he had the nerve to bring Samantha to my party to come over. He caught me coming out of Judy's house on my way home. He pretty much knew where to find me at that point. After he began driving, he sometimes came to Diana's house looking for me. I was relieved that he came, but still mad at his black ass. He always had me on an emotional roller coaster when we were at odds. "Can I have my watch back, please?" He asked with such sincerity, looking so innocent with his beautiful brown eyes. I couldn't refuse and took it off and placed it in his hand. After he put it on, he said, "Come on, let's go for a ride." He put his hand around my shoulder and led me to the passenger door. He unlocked and opened the door for me to get in. Boy, was he being a gentleman. He must want to get naked, I thought to myself. Marcus drove a little beyond Parchester Village neighborhood and parked the car. He wanted to climb in the back seat. We did. He stripped butt naked except for his boxers. His hormones were ready. I took off my sweater only because it was hot. We talked as I kept him at arm's length. I asked him why wasn't he over Samantha's house. "She is just a friend who I have no interest in whatsoever," he explained. "I just gave her a ride because she asked me to." He was always ready with his script. We both must have been tired and drifted to sleep after chattering a while about nothing. Moments later, I awoke to an officer's flashlight tapping on the window. Another one was on the side of the car where Marcus was peering in the window. They must have noticed the car sitting and thought to check it out. Marcus was out like a light, and I tapped to wake him up. When I rolled down the window, he asked, "How old are you?" I nervously replied, 17. He then asked, "And just what do you think your parents would think if they knew what you were out here doing?" I wanted to reply that I wasn't doing anything, but before I could, he asked Marcus how old he was. 18. He answered and later told me I should have said the same. They asked to see his identification, which he didn't have. Then they told him, "Well, you can't drive this car," but didn't take the keys. The other officer instructed us to put our clothes back on. I threw my sweater over my head and was done. They shined their flashlights on Marcus as he scrambled to put his attire back on. "How embarrassing," he commented and quickly put his pants on to cover his boxers. "Ought to be glad you didn't take your drawers off." I laughed. When he finished dressing, they told him once again not to drive. "Yes, sir," he responded, and couldn't wait for them to leave. When they did, he put the car in neutral and got behind, pretending to push it as it rolled down the hill. When he was sure they were gone, he took over and we were out of there. He drove me home as we talked about the embarrassing moment with the police. We spent a few minutes in the car talking and then kissed goodnight. We were on good terms again. This has been Boyfriend, Teenage Love, written by Vella Jamar, narrated by Deja Nance.